Hello, my name is Bill Backus. I'm the preservationist for the Prince William County Historic Preservation Office. And right now I'm standing in the Haislip Hall House, an 1850s house that has been relocated to the Brentsville Courthouse Historic Center in Bristow, Virginia. This is one of my favorite sites in all of Prince William County because this is a average person's home, or generally an average person's home. A lot of the historic houses that get preserved over the years, they aren't regular people's homes. Those are usually the mansions that get preserved, like Ripon Lodge or Ben Lomond. So what most Prince William residents would be living in, especially in the 1800s, really aren't accessible today. And so this is why this building's one of my favorite structures that we have. Now, a really brief history of how this structure got here. This is originally built in the 1850s, a few miles to the west of here, in the Hall area. In the early 2000s, when that area was being built up, this house was slated for demolition, but instead of being demolished, it was instead moved to the Brentsville Courthouse Historic Center and restored to an 1850s, 1860s appearance. And so what I want to talk about a little bit is the construction of this building, because I think this is a really neat building. So if you come on in, it might be a little dark. So this building is constructed in the 1850s, right at a time of construction differences. So in the 1860s, you have a lot of steam-powered saws and sawmills coming into operation. So you would have saw-milled lumber. But when this building is constructed in the early 1850s, yes, we're on the cusp of this revolution as part of the Industrial Revolution, but it's still cheaper and still easier to hand-hewn these logs. And hand-hewn is this. So you see these notches. So this indicates that this building, or these timbers, were hand-hewn. If it were a circular saw, you would see circular motions from the buzzsaw going through. So basically what hand-hewn means is the timber were cut down, and then they were left to cure for a little bit because you don't want to be building a structure out of green wood. And then once those pieces of timber have been cured enough, they would be used to build a house. And so you want to have a uniform sized house. You don't want to have one section of the wall bulging out a little bit more. So to do that, you'd have to make sure that all the logs are uniform size. And to take down a little bit extra width, or a couple inches, or maybe in a few cases a couple feet, you'd hand hewn it. So there'd be basically an axe and sometimes a drawing knife. We have a drawing knife right here, and you could use the sawhorse. This would be used probably for a little bit smaller pieces of timber used in construction. Something like this is just too big. And so you'd either use an axe or a drawing knife to very narrowly bring down the width that you want it to be. So it's a lot of hard work. It's very labor intensive. We don't know who built this house. Yes, we do think that elements of the Haislip family built this structure, but they also in the 1850s do have a couple enslaved individuals recorded being owned and living with the Haislip Hall family. So more than likely, there's also enslaved people who are working building this structure. What's interesting about this building, though, as I get some whitewash on my hands, is that they left the wooden beams exposed. So this is basically a log cabin, which is very, very common in America, especially in the western areas of the United States in the 19th century. So think of like Wisconsin, Illinois, Tennessee, Arkansas, Texas. But they're still being used quite frequently in Virginia as well, especially in newer parts of Virginia, or newly settled parts of Prince William County, like western Prince William is in the 1800s. And so this is a very, very common technique to construct your building out of, instead of doing brick or a frame wooden structure. What's interesting about this is they never covered it up. There's no architectural evidence that these pieces of the logs were ever framed up or covered up with like a plaster wall, which is interesting because when we go outside, The exterior is covered up. So this is not the original 1800s siding. This is a reproduction, but we are using historical techniques and evidence to replicate what this building would have looked like 150 odd years ago. So what's interesting is they put siding on the outside, but not siding on the inside. Now you think about that. Why would you want to put siding on the outside? Well, this is a status symbol. In the 1800s, it is a sign of wealth or prosperity for middling farmers to build their main residences out of a frame structure. And so if you show to the world that you're living in a log cabin, even though it's a nice, large 2-story log cabin, it's still a log cabin. So what they're doing is they're trying to hide that up. So they would put the siding on to make the structure look like it possibly could be built out of wood frames. But what's interesting again is when you go inside, if you're a visitor actually visiting the Haislip family, you immediately see that this is not actually a frame building, it's a log cabin. But for the Haislip family, all they want to focus on are the people traveling by their house, not the actual guests coming in. So that's a really neat feature, I think a very unique feature about the Haislip Hall House. And hopefully you'll be checking out this channel more often, so to have a little bit more of a behind the scenes or sneak peek or more in-depth videos on some of the history that we have.